Don't move.
Is it scary being an FBI agent?
Will she grab the legs of this killer? A curious little girl in her red jacket walked close to a car that stood in front of her house. Her attention soon made its way to a voice in the backyard of the house. A creepy, pale man approached her and called her the almost birthday girl. Cut to years later, FBI agent Lee Harker is assigned to a case along with Agent Fisk. Harker, with her hunch, manages to choose a house to ask about the suspect. But the situation escalates when Fisk gets shot in the head, prompting Lee to enter the house. The perpetrator was sitting at the end of his bed with his hands raised, waiting for her. Agent Carter, Lee's boss, figures out that she has some kind of psychic ability and assigns her to a decades-long murder involving multiple families, who the fathers murdered before they took their own lives. Letters with satanic symbols and coding, all signed Longlegs, were found at the sites. In the evening, Lee visits Carter's house, where she meets his wife Alana and daughter Ruby, who later invites Lee to her upcoming birthday. Once she reaches home, Lee indulges in the case. Suddenly, someone starts pounding on Lee's door. Even though she was expecting Longlegs, was he at the door? She sees a figure standing in the woods. She goes to confront it, but the person enters her house and leaves something for her inside. It was an envelope. However, the instructions were not available until January 14th. Lee opens the envelope to see a birthday card featuring satanic coding, similar to the ones left in the serial killings. A passage of the Book of Revelation, "I stood upon the sand of the sea," was deciphered with a pinch of threat. The next day, Carter brings Lee in to investigate another Longlegs murder. Lee finally concludes that the murders coincide within 6 days of the birthdays of the family's daughters, all of the dates being the 14th of any given month. The dates of each murder all form a triangle on a linear calendar, with one date missing from the equation, where Longlegs will strike again. At the same time, Longlegs goes to a store for supplies, where he has an argument with a teenage clerk and returns home ranting and yelling madly. To get a lead, Lee and Carter look to go after the only survivor of Longlegs' killings, Carrie Ann, who escaped an encounter since she was at school when her father committed the murders. The movie takes a turn now. Under the floorboards, they uncover a doll meant to resemble a young Anne, with a mysterious metal ball as the brain of the doll. After the examination, they hear a static noise coming out of the doll. But that noise takes a toll on Lee, and she starts seeing horrifying images. Lee visits Anne at the psych ward and realizes that Longlegs has already visited her. She says in a monotone that she would now do anything that Longlegs asked her to do, even if it meant killing Lee. Carter tells Lee that he knows she had an encounter with Longlegs when she was a child that she might have forgotten. That forces her to visit Ruth, her mother. Lee finds a picture snapped by a young Lee right when Longlegs comes to see her and Ruth, while the FBI captured Longlegs using the snapshot. In a brief interrogation, Longlegs addresses Lee and creepily sings her happy birthday. Lee goes into the interrogation room to speak to Longlegs personally to find his accomplices. He goes on about how he serves the man downstairs and insists on asking her to ask her mother about his accomplices. He wishes Lee a happy birthday before violently smashing his face on the table, leaving a mess before he dies. Carter scolds Lee for not having Longlegs under control and informs her that Anne has suicide. Lee goes to Ruth's home with Agent Browning but doesn't find her mother. But is that the end? Ruth emerges from behind Browning and blows her head off. Lee runs outside to confront her, who aims at a doll resembling a young Lee. Ruth tells Lee that she is free from his control and not to shoot the doll. Lee then loses consciousness. Ruth's voice can be heard telling Lee a story about the day Longlegs first visited them when she pleaded with him to spare them. From that day, Ruth has been his accomplice who delivered the dolls, dressing up like a nun to manipulate fathers into carrying out their daughters' killings. Longlegs had also been living in their basement, making him the man downstairs as well. Ruth justifies her actions to save Lee from dying at the hands of Longlegs. Lee wakes up in her bedroom and finds her mom gone. She answers a phone call, and a creepy voice tells her that she is missing Ruby's birthday. Taking her mother's car, she heads to Carter's house. Ruth is already there with the doll that looks like Ruby. Lee tries to warn Carter, but he is controlled to sound angry and abrasive. Tension is created when Anna gets stabbed while in the kitchen with Carter to grab the cake. Lee tries to get her mom to stop, but she defends. Lee shoots Carter before he kills Ruby, and Ruth stands up with fury to try and stab both Lee and Ruby. But Lee shoots her mother in the head. When Lee tries to destroy the doll, she runs out of bullets and simply leaves the house with Ruby. Now, will the long-legged doll follow them? We'll never know. Write down your thoughts about the movie. Do hit the like button and share it with your fellow fans. Be sure to check in by pressing the bell icon.